This is David Cowen with Careers in the Business of Law. My very special guest today is Prab Singh, the Chief Operating Officer of Steno. Not a lot of people, Prab, have heard of Steno yet and your new reimagination, reinvention. So, let's just jump right into it. If you can tell us a little bit about Steno, your background, and then we're going to talk about 2025, 2026, and 2027. This is the year-end roundup, visioning from top leaders in the marketplace. What was 25 like? What's 26 going to look like? And let's leak a little into the crystal ball of 2027. Prab, I'm so glad you could take some time to
Yeah.
join me this afternoon. Welcome.
Well, yeah, thank you for having me. Excited to be here and share some thoughts. So at Steno, we provide court reporting, filing, and service of process services to law firms. Simply at a high level, that's what we do. If you want to take away one thing, that's what we do. We do it, however, in a more innovative and unique way than's been done in the past. And a lot of that is through technology. We've made it easier for lawyers to work with us. We made the process of booking those services pretty easy. And then what we've done over the last 2 years is figured out how to use AI to help lawyers and legal professionals understand and interpret those documents through AI in a really low friction, simple way. So we're approaching an industry that kind of hasn't changed for many, many years and tried to take the best of technology to make it a better experience for our clients.
So
Uh,
two questions for you. What's changed most, right? As we look back a little bit, what's changed most in 2025 that was unexpected? You say when you woke up in January, you woke up in January and you're making all your New Year's resolutions and you think the market's going to be X. What's changed the most for you? And then tell us what's changed most about Steno.
Yeah, so 2025 is the year where I think AI went from this like kind of shiny new object that was like felt far afield from you to something that is actually real. That's really what I think happened in 2025. And it's no longer this abstract thing that you talk about as an innovation type of thing in a conference, but more, hey, we're actually using this, we're paying for it, it has a big impact on our budgets and on our people. And so that's what happened in 2025. When you do that, though, that does change the expectations of how people are using it. So the clients are now saying, "Hey, I need to know the data side of this, security, implementation. I need to figure out how my lawyers are using it. I need to look at the costs." It's no longer this kind of shiny new object. I think that's kind of major thing that happened this year, which is going to then have a huge impact on what happens, in 2026.
Yeah, if you were to ask me the same question, I would say what's surprised me the most and changed the most is the number of hours. If ChatGPT and AI were a car, it's surprising the number of miles I've driven and the number
Mm-hmm.
of roads and terrain that I've driven on. I've moved. That surprised me how much time I've spent and how many different games, if you will, I've played with it. How about you personally? Are you Gemini guy, a chat guy? Like, what is the platform or the platforms of choice for you personally and professionally?
I've gotten addicted to Claude historically, but I will say that the recent Gemini models that have come out, it's just mind blowing how good they are. And what's cool about this technology shift is it's like been a lot of technology shifts in business where they really only affect you in business. This is one where it affects every human in their personal life. And so it's like one of the reasons why the adoption is so quick, because it's not like you use AI in your workplace and then you go home and it goes away. Now you're using it to book a trip or to ask about a health issue or whatever else you're trying to figure out. And so it's just kind of wild that I can leave my office, dealing with very complex, AI questions and then go to my kid's soccer game and talk to someone about how they're using it, for something else. It's kind of wild how that's happened and 2025 was the year, I think, where everybody's using it in all sorts of respects of their lives.
Yeah, I think it's it's the iPad moment or the
Mm.
iPad something. It's the iPad. It's not a moment. It's more than a moment, but it's like the last time that happened was the iPad. Like you used it in the office, then you took it home and you read the newspaper, and then you showed your kids or your wife or significant other like picture. Like it just was everywhere all the time, and still is.
100%. It's the only thing I would say is I think this is in the legal space in particular. The other thing that happened in 2025 is this is the biggest year of investment, I think, in legal tech that we've seen maybe ever. So, you have hundreds, of companies coming into the space and, many of them just started this year. And so we're going to see a lot of those companies really come to market next year. And I think that's going to be pretty interesting because there's a lot of stuff that I can't even, I haven't even thought about that's going to all of a sudden show up next year in the market.
The let's talk a little bit about the nitty gritty, right? I want to talk about the nitty gritty, and I want to talk about your background as it pertains to the nitty gritty. What's always interesting to me, and I think to our listeners, is the backgrounds and the journeys of senior executives and like how you got here. And I think that that informs so much of the space today. And by that I mean you're an outsider, right? You came from, and I'll let you tell the story, but you're an outsider that's come insight into legal. We didn't have that in e-discovery. Like in the e-discovery boom, right? 2004, 6, 8, 10. Over the last 20 years, we didn't have like a whole lot of outsiders come from a whole lot of different places to reimagine and reinvent e-discovery. Like we kind of figured that out internally within the legal space. But with AI on top of legal, the business of law has a lot of outsiders coming in, consultants, Bain, McKinsey, the Big Four, and yourself coming from corporate. Can you just tell us a little bit about that journey and how that's influencing you and others at Steno and in the industry writ large?
Yeah, absolutely. The really quick background, I spent the last 20 years in the tech and startup ecosystem. I have helped over the past 15 of those 20 years, let's say, really helping scale growth companies. So I was an early employee at Uber, helping Uber Eats scale as a business. I was at WeWork through all of its ups and downs from scale all the way to an IPO. I was at a company called Clover Health after that. So three companies that were kind of unicorn tech companies that grew very fast and had to kind of become more mature businesses. And what's interesting is they're all different industries. We're talking about healthcare and real estate and mobility and food delivery. So I've come in outside into a lot of different companies, and my framework now, after having done that a couple times now, is really to kind of take the best of the outside in and the inside out. What does that mean? It means a lot of tech people tend to come into new industries and they're too outside in. They have all this confirmation bias from their past. And so they're saying, hey, we should do everything in this industry the way that it was done, the way that everything else happened in other industries. And they sort of force their solution, their thinking down people's throats a little bit too much. What you really need to do is have a deep respect and understanding for the inside out. How do lawyers do things? What's the history? What's the reason why they started, looking at analyzing a problem this way versus that way? Why do they not use technology? Just using technology doesn't mean they're bad professionals. Really understanding those dimensions is what makes you a great company. And so then at Steno, we take a lot of that thinking. How do we make sure we don't have too much outside in bias, but also not too much inside out bias? How do we not try to just do things the way that, the way they've always been done? And that's the blending of those two things is what builds a really and truly special company. And so I think I'm not me being from outside, I really try to think about all the great stuff I learned before. And then I really try to come in here and say, hey, how do I spend all my waking time trying to understand this industry as best I can?
Who do you look up to in that regard? When you look to the right and you look to the left and you see your peers and colleagues, who do you want to give a shout out to that exemplifies that along with yourself?
Well, look, the co-founders of Steno have a pretty special story in a lot of ways. I'd start with them. I mean, Dylan is someone who was a legal professional who saw a big opportunity in the space when a lot of other people didn't. Greg's a startup and tech leader who really came into this business and helped, breathe a lot of that entrepreneurial life into it. And Dan is a technologist. And when we started the company 7 years ago, having those three types of profiles come together and build a company was, especially in our space, was kind of novel. And so when you look at the DNA of a business, and the DNA of a business is ultimately what makes it successful, you have really deep legal expertise from someone who is a practicing plaintiff attorney and knows what they're doing. You have really strong business and finance skills, and you have someone who is a really deep and intelligent technologist. The DNA wasn't just someone who just came into this industry without any of those three things. So that's a lot of why I think we're a special company. It's the melding of those three skill sets.
I think that's absolutely true, and I see that elsewhere. So if there are, 100 startups and/or scaling companies and/or growth companies in the industry, these are many of them, right? And I think certainly those that will be successful. One, they've been here before, right? They've been in this industry, in the startup tech space, tech services, tech or services, and they've got 20 years of experience, right? They've been through the e-discovery wars, they've been through the information governance wars, they've been through the legal operation wars, and they're like, okay, I understand the customer and I understand the market landscape. Alternatively, like you and yours, it's like, wait, no, we come from this startup environment. And I guess why am I saying this? I'm saying this, if you're listening and you're curious, right? If you are radically curious and you're willing to work, and I'm going to 996 right now. This is where I want to go.
Mm.
It's like, are you a 996 guy or not? There are those that are and those that aren't. If you're a 996 guy and you've got real fundamentals behind you, whether it's an MBA, if you put an MBA and a JD and somebody who's 996 and you put them all together in a room, like they're going to figure this out. What are your thoughts on that? And then you can say anything you want about 996.
Yeah, look, I think I've been in the startup world for a long time. I've seen all sorts of evolution of how things come together. What matters the most, I say this a lot from a company culture perspective, is you have missionaries and not mercenaries. And company culture drives that. And so you can be 996, you can be, a different combination of those numbers. But as long as you're mission driven, you're going to run through walls to solve problems and you're going to be outcomes oriented. Missionaries want to solve the problem. They don't just want to, improve their own well-being. That's the ultimate key to success for any startup that's growing. And sometimes you get to a situation where you grow to a scale and, we're getting to a larger size where you start to see things shifting in terms of that culture. So to me, I really think the fundamental thing here is all about the culture that you build as a company to keep that momentum and growth that you have kind of behind you.
There's something that Steno is doing. I think that's going to give you an interesting competitive advantage, or certainly a market share. And so you are going from a typical court reporting, very interesting, good, high margin, interesting business. But as I understand it, it's like, wait a second, what about all that? We have all of this really interesting data. You could never before go through 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 transcripts. Like you just couldn't do, if you could go through 100, right? Still a lot of hours though. And it's, a group of, now you can go through 10,000 or 100,000 or a million transcripts and glean insights. Can you talk a little bit about this shift? I think it's really an interesting and compelling story of business intelligence as well as strategic intelligence, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing with AI on
Yeah.
top of all that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty simple, and you hit the nail on the head. By being a service provider that plays in all of these areas, in the discovery process, we have access to lots of great data that ultimately is what a litigator uses to, win their case if they get that far. And when you think about these large language models, most companies are leveraging the same model or a similar model. It's really more about what you put inside that model that allows it to spit out the best answers. What's great about us is we have all of this foundational information and data. If we can then put that into our own model, we can put that into our own tool that's again leveraging those same models. The output can have way more context and hopefully help people make a better case. Um, and so really we think about it as, hey, historically you used to think about this data as like kind of exhaust data, almost like as garbage. Like, you would have a transcript kind of stuck in your email or somewhere in your database and you wouldn't really pay attention to it. We said, hey, let us help Steno should help you organize all of that information and so that you can access in a really low friction way and then ultimately get amazing insights that come out of it. Um, Data to me is going to be the battleground in the future. When you look at how there's so many tools out there that again are leveraging the same models. It's not necessarily the legal tech tool that you're using. It's what's the information you're putting into it, and how do you make sure you have the right information that's going into it at the right time so that you can get that better answer.
When I think about Steno, and can you tell us what the new name is that you're launching, or you're not ready to reveal that yet?
Not yet. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. There you go. So let's say that you're a sawmill. And the way I think of Steno today is you were a sawmill and you've figured out what to do with I'm going to call it data exhaust. I'm going to call it sawdust. You've figured out how to take the sawdust, put a little bit of glue and epoxy with it, and make either two by fours or plywood. And now you're building how like that was never done before. You just swept it up and threw it over. You forgot about it. Like all those transcripts were like, well, okay, that's just sawdust and data exhaust. It's not anymore.
Yeah, and I'll tell you one other thing, David. I think why can Seno do this uniquely? It comes back to the DNA question. We from day one have looked at ourselves as a technology company and as well as a services company. And why is that important? We look to innovate on every part of the process every day. So we have the DNA to quickly react when we see an opportunity and then make it real and make it great. while still keeping, very, very high quality service for our customers. And to me, that's what's really special about us. And it sounds simple, but very hard to recreate.
When you look at when you look at uh, the court reporting space, or you look at Steno, and you think of a SWOT analysis, I'm going to go do an MBA thing here with you for a minute, okay? I
Sure.
think that'll be interesting for the audience. Like, let's make this an MBA conversation and not a legal conversation. There's no shortage of that. When I think of the strengths that court reporting has and that Steno has, it's it's access to customers. It's the customer database. Like, you've got, do you want to call it distribution? Do you want to call it market share? Like, give us a little MBA 101
Yeah.
here, if you will. It's like, here's the
I,
strength.
I, I'll go back to a quick point that lays the foundation. When you look at the foundational models, right? ChatGPT, let's use them as an example, right? The spread between what they can provide and what legal tech companies can provide is like getting very, very thin. What does that mean? It means in a post-AI world, it's not the software that's that hard to replicate. It's the customers, so distribution, right? What you said, and data. Those are the two battlegrounds of the future, in my opinion, because it's no longer the software that's hard to replicate or the models that everybody's accessing. And so when we think about this, our strength as a company, we've got massive distribution. Our distribution in terms of number of law firms is larger than most of the largest legal tech companies out there that have raised crazy amounts of money. And we keep growing. That is going to allow us to continue to build more and more solutions for them in a way that we want to, right? Because again, we know how to build the tech and we, unlike many of the other companies in our space, we've learned how to really deliver technology in a low friction way through the channel of court reporting. That is a really unique thing to do. And again, it comes down to us knowing how to do it and really meeting customers where they are. And then on the other side of it, on the distribution side, I think we have a unique value proposition. If you talk to a lot of the salespeople that come to Steno, the first thing they'll say is, I worked at this other company for 20 years, and this is the first time I have something unique to say. It's not just the price and the relationship, it's all of the stuff that comes with being a Steno customer.
Yeah, it's not a commodity. What you in the industry are moving towards is not it's not a commodity item. But what I do want to talk again, I want to go back to our a little MBA class here, which is, you also have what's called feet on the street. How many feet
Hmm.
on the street? What's that sales force look like? So you've got market penetration, you've got market share, you've got feet on the street. So when you think about, if you're thinking about a startup, like you're in your garage right now, or you're listening on your jog, or you're listening, on your ride home. It's like, okay, here's some critical components of what you need to have to be successful. Talk to us about feet, the value, and how many feet on the street do you have?
Yeah, I mean, on our sale between our sales and marketing folks, we have, over 50 people, approaching 60 people, and it's growing every week. I mean, we can barely hire fast enough, and it's across the country. And what I'll say is that in this industry, it's still very much a service industry. You still have to meet people where they are. What does that mean? You got to be out there. To your point, we have something unique to say, but we're also out there taking people out to lunches and dinners and getting to know them and building that trust. It's the trust that really matters. At the end of the day, the average lawyer doesn't necessarily know, A from B to Z. Like it's that you have to build that trust to even have that conversation about, what you have. And a lot of founders think that, hey, I'm going to build the best product in technology and it's just going to win. That's not how the things really work in the real world for many, many things. You have to get the opportunity to get them to trust you and get to know you and believe in you and the business. And oftentimes, the first conversation isn't about necessarily what you offer, it's about you as a person. And that's one of the reasons why we treat our employees so well. We want to have a smiling face who's passionate about the company they work in when they go talk to a client, because that's the first thing a client sees is, hey, I want to talk to that person. They seem interesting. It's not just about having a shiny new, piece of technology, because there's so much out there. How do you even make sense of it? If you're a lawyer today, there's like 1,000 legal tech tools. How do you make sense of which is better or not? You don't have a technology degree, so it's really hard to determine, who to trust in this industry.
That concept comes up all the time at every solid. We do solid in San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Atlanta. There's the Cowen Cafe every week, on Thursdays. But I will tell you that, at every solid, certainly it comes up the importance of trust and relationship and partnership. And by that, I mean, what I hear is, corporate law departments and law firms, the buyers, if you will, buyers want partnership. right? Especially now more than ever before. It's like, will you do some R&D for free? And I shout out to Amy Sellers, who I first heard this phrase from, and I've been riding it like a horse ever since. So thank you, Amy Sellers. But R&D for free is like, Prob, I've got an idea, you've got a technology. I don't want to pay you full boat for this, but I do want to partner with you. Will you work with me? And I find that the service providers and or the tech, the tech software providers, if you'll do that, and they will, right? Of course you will. Like if it's a significant and meaningful opportunity, yes, you'll create around that client. Have you had some experiences like that? You want to comment on R&D for free and or the value of that partnership?
Absolutely. I mean, we are very much a customer obsessed company. And so we spent a lot of time with some of our large and small clients and basically said, look, we're gonna really sit and listen and understand you to try to build a product and service around you that we think is also scalable. Transcript Genius, some of the tools that we've come out with, our exhibit sharing tools, Steno Connect for Zoom, a lot of these things were built on the back of partnering closely with clients.
There you
And
go.
it goes to what I said about our, kind of how we operate as a company. That's the inside outside. Hey, let me really understand how you operate and how you work. How is my solution going to make your life easier and make you better in your job? Not just how is it good for me? It's being as selfless as possible in that conversation. Um, I will tell you one of the advantages of being so close to our customers with the trust and distribution I talked about is we have the opportunity to have those conversations. We're not just basing, what we're building on, internal dialogue and debate from people that don't come from the space. It's like real meaningful conversations with people in the industry. The last point I will say, David, on this that triggered something in my head, which is there's so many great tools out there, but for many people, it's about actually using them that's a challenge. Like at the end of the day, how many times have you been, at a company and it's like, hey, I want you to start using Microsoft Teams or Zoom or Google Docs or Asana or Monday or new workflow tool. And, you're sitting there saying like, I don't get it. This is not how I do things. I don't want to know. I don't know where to go to get the stuff I used to get, whatever it is. And so that's what people are facing in law firms. They're just sitting there saying, they might try it once, and if it doesn't speak to them, they might just shut it off. Like, that's really hard to overcome if you don't have a relationship with the client to help them overcome that objection and get them to use the tool.
Let's extend that, if you will. So here we are, we're having this conversation about, the sales process. I want to bring this and make it really a lot more personal to the head of legal operations or the chief innovation officer. And again, we talk all the time about the core four, like who are your core four? It's the same thing. Like I want to build this bridge of trust with who's around you internally. So whether you're the chief innovation officer at a law firm, right? And or a missionary in the law firm and you just believe in this, who are the core four people around you that you're building that trust, building that relationship so that you can move from now to next internally? Are you beginning to see those pods or those task forces or those core fours or those key threes begin to assemble themselves? Because I'm advocating for that. I advocate all the time that you reach out, one level above, one level below, and then one to the right and one to the left and say, okay, we're the core four here. And
Hmm.
we believe that this is how the organization can most benefit and how I can bring value to it. Can you speak to what you're seeing in the marketplace, not from a Steno point of view, but just like this makes good business sense and this is how careers are made and things move forward, momentum is created?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first and foremost, I think that the people defined within, let's say, law firms today are the evangelists. It's the people that are
Hmm.
curious enough to be the early adopters of this and understand how it works and have actually used it and have results. Because those are the people that are going to be the kind of the recipe for you to then, move from there to having it be something that works across the firm. And so you can talk to someone who's just on the innovation side, and they may not have actually used the tool in practice, right? They're thinking ahead in terms of we need to have a tool, but you need to go one or two levels deeper to that and have someone who's actually used it as a practicing legal professional, whether it's a paralegal, a legal assistant, or a lawyer, because that's really the rich insight. That's what the rich kind of experience and insights you need. And that's also the water cooler piece. You actually have someone who's actually had real success using it, and it's a case study internally. You need all of that to succeed. You and I and others have probably been online and gone to Reddit and seen some threads around how some of these tools are not valuable to some people, right? And there's all sorts of stories like that. And and so there are definitely people within law firms who are saying all these negative things about tools too. And so just saying I have a tool is not enough. You actually have to have those missionaries, those evangelists who can say, no, 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 here's very specifically how I saved our firm money, how I saved my client money, how I got a better ROI, how I figured something out, how I didn't, I wouldn't have figured out otherwise. That's you need that building block, and it has to be tangible and not just from an innovation perspective.
Yeah, so here's the action that I want to recommend. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're still listening, clearly you are radically curious, you're adaptable, you've got some level of digital resourcefulness, and you want to get from that to next, right? And so you're looking for that. My suggestion is this: birds of a feather flock together. Find your core four, find your key three. Don't listen to any of the naysayers. Don't be in the naysayer business. That's the majority. Those that succeed will find their peers that are co-conspirators, right? Or missionaries, co-conspirators as per, Mike Maples and Pattern Breakers. But find those that are curious and, start, a weekly meetup or a monthly meetup. And, if you start with one or two people, and whether it's donuts or pizza or, yogurt, like whatever your health food is, like whatever you do, just start, getting together on with some defined frequency. And one thing will lead to another. Two becomes four, four becomes eight, eight becomes, you know, a following, and that's your posse. It doesn't happen overnight, but if you make that part of like the end of the year and the beginning of next year, you will get from now to next, and you will get smarter, faster with others. Can you give us an Uber or a DoorDash story? Not a Steno story, but an Uber DoorDash, like, yes, David, that's how it works. Let me give you an example.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things I was evangelizing at Uber Eats was trying to get larger brands to use food delivery. And they were really scared, similar to how some firms are scared of what's happening with AI in legal. Why? Because they said, hey, I'm going to hand my food to someone else who's then going to bring it to a customer. Well, I need to control that experience. And I need to make sure that, everything is perfect. And it did take those evangelists within those food companies to understand that this is where the future is and this is what their customers really wanted. And I think a lot of what I saw was the people that really framed their arguments from the perspective of the customer are the one who won. You'd go to a brand like Five Guys or TGI Fridays or name any large food brand in the country, and it was those people in the organization who said, "Hey, look on Twitter. There's like 1,000 people that want our food to be delivered. Look at the data that Uber is sharing with us to show that people are asking for us in their app. We've got to meet the customers where they are. We can't be stuck up in the past and just say, hey, we're not going to do that. And let's actually then go partner with them to make sure the message they're putting out about our brand is right, that the logos look right, that hey, when the food is delivered, we've got the right bags and the right, insulation, things like that. Those are the brands that were so successful when food delivery kind of grew post-COVID because they were prepared and they did everything based upon the customers versus those brands who I think were a little bit more focused on, controlling things and they took the negative view versus the kind of positive optimistic view.
Yeah, I will say I'm so with you on this. I meet the customer where you have to listen to the customer, which is what I love about your business model right now. You've got so many feet on the street that can listen to the customer. And I, for one, never want to walk into a Five Guys, but I can't wait for that burger and those fries to get delivered to my house. I want the
100%.
experience of eating the burger, not getting the burger.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. There's a lot of people who actually in the food delivery space, in food delivery, who actually they would never want to go into a McDonald's and admit that they went to a McDonald's, but they will order it all the time because no one ever knows and it just shows up at their door. It's like a guilty pleasure.
That's great. All right. Where do you want to take us home? You can either ask me a question if you want, or you can put in a plug, or both, or you can put a plug in for the talent story and the roles that you're looking for. I know that you're going to double, double, and double again, as so many of your peers are.
Yeah.
I give you column A and
Well,
column B.
well, maybe I'll take the talent one. I think that's a good one. I think, right now this is such a unique time in our industry and, you know, it's growing so fast. There's so many people coming into it from the outside world. Talent is everything. You and I had a conversation earlier about how important talent is, right? It's my number one focus as a leader. We are growing and doubling in size, and I think we need talent in almost every function or profession there is, from lawyers all the way to accountants and business people and operational people. So if you're curious about what's happening in legal tech, you want to work at a missionary driven, fun company that is really trying to transform this industry, shoot me a note. I would love to talk to you.
You want to just drop your email there and we'll put it in the show notes as well? Or DM,
Yes.
DM you. So,
Yes.
Prob,
DM
just
me.
Prob,
Yeah.
spell your full name so people get you on LinkedIn.
Yes, it's Prabdeep. The last name is Singh, Singh.
At Steno. So you can
Yeah.
find it if you're curious. And I challenge you, like I love this. I love this challenge. I challenge you. If you're up, if you're now to next, you're like, oh, how do I get to a top level? How do I get to a COO, of a real growth company? Here's how you do it. You drop a note and don't do it with ChatGPT, although it can certainly start the letter for you. Drop him a note and tell him why you want to talk to him. Like that's how I started my career. That's how I taught my kids how to start their careers. My name is, I'm a recent graduate of, and I listen to your dot, dot, dot. And I'd love to introduce myself and, see if there might be an opportunity for us to work together. Or I really love the outreach. And could I get 5 minutes or 10 minutes on your calendar? Go ahead, be daring, build that momentum. You will be amazed at who will respond back to you. I want to do one more story on careers and talent and the demand and flow of talent, and then we'll close it up. And Mark Jenkins, the head of legal operations innovation at Constellation, which is a major energy company, was speaking at Solid Atlanta a couple of weeks ago. And here's what he said that was fascinating to me. He's talking about the investment in infrastructure in this country. So we're talking about data centers, and we're talking about Meta and Google and Amazon and Microsoft. And Microsoft just cut a $17 billion deal with Constellation to reboot 3 Mile Island. And so that's happening. And then Meta cuts a $22 billion deal with Constellation for some other energy source because you need energy sources to drive the data centers. And you're going like, David, why are you telling us this story? What has that got to do with legal and the demand and flow of talent? Here's what it is. For every $1 billion of infrastructure that you see in the United States today, there's X number of legal dollars that are generated. Why is that?
Mm.
You've got real estate, you've got contracts, you've got labor and employment, you've got like it goes on and on the number of hours for every it's for every 100,000, but I'm just making every $1 billion that you see being invested, that is an awful lot of legal work. It might not be paralegal work, right, in the old sense, but it is certainly net new billable hours of work that needs to be done to make all of this happen. Any thoughts on that before we close?
Yeah, look, I think that's why this industry is so interesting, right? I think we the where the world is going, especially what you just mentioned, from an infrastructure perspective, means that the legal profession has a lot in front of it. And so I actually think we're going to come to a place where the legal industry is going to go from being this service provider that just does the job to actually, as they use these tools, being more of a partner, because some of these things are so big that you need to be, as a legal professional, more than just a, hey, let me get the job done and bill you back. And so I actually think this is where, like, the legal profession starts to transform to being more of a partner oriented profession for everybody. And technology really allows you to do that. And so when I hear all this investment that's happening, I'm like, great, the legal profession can actually help enable so much of it.
I don't know if we got a prediction. As I close us out, I'm like, I promised the audience we'd do some kind of a visionary crystal ball prediction for 26, 27.
Sure.
I think we have to do that. Prob,
I'll
what do
give
you
you I'll give you two quick ones. I think what's happened, right, with all of the investment in this space, I think there may be a little bit of a shakeout. I think what's happening now is AI becomes real and not just this fun distraction or abstraction. There's definitely some companies that are not going to succeed or going to have struggle a little bit to succeed given the competition. So we'll see a little bit of that. It'll be healthy for this industry. It's not going to be it'll be a good thing net net. I think the other part of that, when I think about what's going to happen, is I think you're going to see some left field players enter legal. I'll give you an example. Salesforce entered the healthcare world with Healthcare Cloud a little, I don't know when it was, 8 or 7 years ago or something like that. And no one expected, Salesforce to have a play in healthcare. And so as this industry becomes bigger and people see dollar signs and see the opportunity and see legal professionals use technology, I think don't be surprised if some company you didn't even think about all of a sudden enters this world and starts to compete and really try to take a piece of the pie. So I think let's look out for some left field kind of companies coming into the legal world we never even thought would touch this space, given the now that it feels like a really good place to play.
I'll say that my prediction, I don't know if this is a prediction or not. You help me share, tell me what you think this is. Here's what I think, right? So here's the prediction. I think that anybody who approaches 2026 like a freshman in college, where the possibilities are limitless, where you haven't declared your major, or you have, that whoever you are, and you go in and you're like, everything is possible, anything is possible. I can't wait, and you attack the next 4 years. If you attack the next 4 years, like you hopefully attacked college, well, maybe not exactly like you attacked college, because that could be, that could be a disaster. But if you attack it for the next 4 years, you will wind up wildly successful in 20.
Yeah. I'll tell you a mentor of mine years ago told me this line. It's never left me, which is there's a time to learn and there's a time to earn, and one day they will kind of both come together for you. And the reason he told me that is when
Mm.
you're earlier in your career, it's all about learning, and learning will end up helping you earn. But if you focus too much on earning, you will maybe lose the learning part, which is actually more valuable. And so this is definitely the time for all of us to focus on learning, because this is everything that's happening right now is going to transform the industry and the world. And we just have to focus on, I think, understanding it and not shying away from it or focusing too much on other things.
A time to learn and a time to earn. God, what a great ending. Prab Singh, Steno, thank you so very much for sharing your insights, your thought, and your vision for next year with us. I've thoroughly enjoyed our exchange of ideas and can't wait to see you out on the road next year. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks so much, David. Appreciate it.
If you enjoyed this show, be sure to give us a like and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your shows. And if you want to take your career from now to next, never eat alone.